It's not Gauntlet. It's not Gantlet. It's Dunjunz on the CoCo Show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CoCo Show. I'm full of charisma and booze.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're talking about Dunjunz.
Yes, we are.
You know, Aaron, where do you stand on cool guy style? Like when you're spelling out a game title like that, is it good form to misspell a word on purpose, slap a Z at the end of it, and call it a day?
You know, when you've got a name like Dunjunz, right? I mean, you got to think this game's pretty old, but the original, right? And they spelled it this way in the original. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go on the assumption that cool guy style was barely a thing, you know, back in those days. Although it did exist, because I saw cool guy style in the BBSs. So I'm going to give him a pass. But when you put a bunch of extra J's and Z's in there, that you're pushing the envelope of what's acceptable, Bo.
It can be taken too far, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, you could put some. The thing is, here's why I didn't gong this thing. There's no numbers in it. There's no emojis in there. There's no like weird symbols. You know what I mean? There's no poop emojis. So it's okay. Thank God. Thank God those were invented. By the way, my kid's got them on his wall. He thinks they're great. I'm like, you realize this is poop on your wall? Like, why would you celebrate this? It's excrement. It's waste. The body rids itself of it. You know, I don't know.
Now, when you were a young lad on the BBSs today, did you ever play any of those door games?
Tons of them. Oh, yeah, tons.
They were often set in dungeons, correct?
Well, yeah, occasionally, yeah, you would have some in the dungeon, sure.
Really? So there were other places they were set besides dungeons.
I like how you said they were often in dungeons, and when I said they were, you were stunned that you actually were right. Yeah, they were. They were usually like sort of like Zorky, you know, texty type things that you would go through. There weren't a lot of door games in the early days that had any graphics at all. Mm-hmm. But I do recall some sort of like, you know, keyboard character style games where you would move one square at a time, stuff like that. But I like the space stuff more when I was playing.
You were more of a sci-fi guy. Were there sci-fi MUDs back in the day?
I never played any MUDs.
Really?
You know, I mean, well, I guess I used to play like Space Dynasty, Trade Wars. I guess
you know the Chud got real into MUDs, right?
Well, MUDs, I think the difference between like a MUD and like a game like Trade Wars is that you couldn't have multiple people playing Trade Wars at once back in the old days or Space Dynasty. Where in MUDs you could have multiple users playing simultaneously.
Right. So that came along later in the BBS scene than you were.
Well, I think the Chud played those on the internet, frankly.
Oh, they were on the real internet. It wasn't.
There were
just
not
BBS.
very many BBSs locally that had like you got to have multiple phone lines. Think about it. So sometimes you can play games with the guy that ran the BBS, a sysop. That happens sometimes, but normally when you call it, it's like 3 a.m. That sucker's probably in bed, and a lot of times sysop just watch you. You know, like Odin looking down on his subjects. And if you step out of line, they slam the hammer down, you know. So, but they often didn't play.
Do you remember an all-time great door game victory you had?
Yes, I do. I was playing Space Dynasty, and there were these when you attacked other characters, and sometimes there were these guys called mercs that flew around, and you had to outnumber them to like get a leg up on them. But when you attacked them, they would like basically join your side, and it was awesome to get. Like I remember one night, I was getting 10,000 ship. Batches of these guys to come join me. I mean, when you could get super epically powerful in that game, and you're running the entire universe like the Empire, and it didn't happen very often, but the few times it did, it was a real good feeling.
I never played any of those because, you know, BBSs were before my time. I feel like I was left out of a sort of epoch of gaming history because those are hard games to come back to. Certain retro games are easy to come back to. For example, Dunjunz. But, you know, door games, first of all, are there any places to play door games online currently?
Oh, yeah, there are tons of BBSs that are actually, you can play them on the internet. And then there's been a trend recently where it was BBSs coming back out on the phone lines, which is interesting. You know, I've tried to get back into them. There are plenty of ways to do it, including using stuff like the Mister or Raspberry Pis, or, like I said, you can use your regular computer. But you're right, it's tough to go back. And if you live through them, it's almost like going back to like using like a telegraph or something. I mean, like, I'm playing like, I don't know, crap online that looks like top shelf graphics, GTA or whatever, Dead by Dawn, or Dead by Daylight, something like that. That just looks like playing a great game. Everything's on there at once. It's hard to go back and play something like Pimp Wars or something on the BBSs that's all in text and it's super silly. It was a game of its year. I know some people can do it. I have not been able to get back into them, I'm afraid.
Let's talk about Dunjunz, Aaron.
Good idea. But first,
are you ready to take the plunge into the exciting world of the Tandy Color Computer? Have you tried emulation and found it to be confusing and unreliable?
The hell is Bitbanger?
It's time to get yourself a real CoCo and get yourself over to RetroRewind.ca to get it out with everything you need to enter the CoCo universe. The CoCo SDC is the fastest, easiest way to jump into the nirvana that is gaming on the Tandy Color Computer. A preloaded SD card is already included, so just pop it in your CoCo and away you go. Pick up your CoCo SDC at RetroRewind and be sure to use the promo code AMIGOS10 to save 10% off the already low price. Thank you to RetroRewind.ca for sponsoring the CoCo Show.
man, that's a pretty good solid CoCo noise right there, Boat.
I want to say that that's probably the best CoCo music outside, for the CoCo 1, CoCo 2 era I've ever heard.
I do like Anchors Away and that Battleship clone an awful lot. That's a pretty good one, too. I'm just saying.
My favorite part about that Battleship clone is when it uses the cartridge return function.
That thing is great. The relay, that is awesome. But we're here to talk about Dunjunz, spelled cool guy style. For you at home, that's Dunjunz, Dunjunz. So this is an interesting game, Boatster. This was ported over by a guy from the BBC Micro by a guy. I'm going to try to pronounce his name. Ciaran Ascombe.
I believe he's also in charge of the ships of the Grey Havens.
Okay, I don't know what that is. What is that?
It's a Lord of the Rings reference.
Oh, sorry. I didn't get it.
The name of the ship, right?
Now, the original version of this was on the BBC Micro by Julian Avis. This got the port over in 2017. Now, Ascombe is the same fellow behind the emulator X-Roar Boat. He's the guy. So he actually ported us over to play X-Roar.
You know what I think about X-Roar.
So hopefully he won't watch that commercial we just ran. Which, I mean, by the way, any CoCo emulation is okay by me. So, it's funny, Boat. In the past couple months, we've looked at a few dungeon crawlers, including Gauntlet 2. And a game like Dungeon that appeared way back in '87 on the BBC Micro actually took the concept of a Gauntlet into a weird new area, Boat. Because everyone knows the bit in Gauntlet, right? You pick your character, and then you get 3 buddies together, and then the 4 of you run through Gauntlet, the many dungeons of Gauntlet, but y'all have to stay on the same screen. If anybody gets lost, it's a problem. So someone was like, "Oh yeah, let's do it this way," and they made a game where you could literally have 4 independent screens with each character having their own screen. They can go anywhere they want in the dungeon, Boat. Kind of a unique concept and something you wouldn't think about for a system that is this old. So let's get into it here a little bit, Boat. Again, this was released in 2017. This will work on a CoCo 1, 2, or 3 with 32K of memory, and you can use joystick if you want to, Boat. So when this thing pops up, what was your? It comes up with a likely theme there and a nice opening screen. What did you think about this when it popped up?
Oh, I thought it was great because, first of all, you get an actual music track that plays at the beginning. This is like a legitimate piece of music. And then you get a screen that explains exactly what the characters are and exactly what you use to control those characters.
Yeah.
For a 4-player game, that's essential because you've got 4 players that are all crowding around the keyboard. and then you've got one that's using the joystick, obviously. To me, this is an opening that all CoCo games should emulate. Every single CoCo game should open up with a song, and then they should open up with the controls. If they did that, they've accomplished their mission.
Yeah. I want to talk about the opening screen here, where you configure your players. They've got an interesting way of doing it. It lists the 4 different players. You've got a ranger, a magic user, a barbarian, a fighter. And then you can activate whichever controller you want them. Basically, they're all assigned a controller, and you basically check off whichever controller you want to play them on.
It's great.
It's straightforward, I guess is the best way to put it. You've also got a difficulty setting, but the thing I thought was interesting was the video mode. I wish every CoCo game had this too, because it's got 2 different NTSC video modes, a PAL mode. It's got I think it's like a total like 4 video modes you can go through to sort of customize the color palette to the way you like it. Did you have to look through these at all, or did you just
I didn't, because NTSC 1 worked perfectly, so I didn't investigate further.
Yeah, I had to look around to see if I could find one that I liked better, or worse. But I could see how you could use any of them, so they're very helpful. This thing actually has a story behind it, Bo. If you go back to the old Beeb, I looked into it here. So, long story short, 4 heroes have to recover the Chalice of Binding and save the world. Max Scrain, the Great Demon, has hidden it deep in the Dunjunz complex. They must battle it out against bashers, find treasure, magic, adventure, and death. To help in their quest, the gods have given the 4 heroes extra powers. The ranger uses a bow, and his quiver has the power to produce unlimited arrows. The wizard has been taught how to cast fireballs. The barbarian's axe can clone itself, always good. And the warrior can draw an infinite number of swords from her sheath. Yes, the warrior is a woman. Kind of cool there, Boat. And then you go through 25 levels. Now, as we mentioned, the screen on this is quite interesting. Now, if you play 4 players, you're going to get 4 independently quartered parts of the screen. The screen is made up of these 4 squares, and on the side of the screen, you're going to get your character's health points. They
call it the HUD.
That's right, the HUD. Exactly, Boat. And you also get like if you're carrying keys or whatnot, it'll show them over there. And now the downside of this boat is that to make all this real estate usable, they have to make everything kind of small. So when this thing came up and you started playing it, what did you think about the way it renders the play field, the size of the characters? Did you run any problems with the size of this thing?
Well, I knew immediately what they were doing. I mean, they were trying to overcome the problem that Gauntlet has, which the Gauntlet has the problem of whenever you're playing a 2-player game, you are stuck with wherever both players have to be on screen at the same time, which means that you can't physically move forward past the player that's furthest behind. You get this a lot in a lot of different games, and a lot of fighting or a lot of beat 'em ups or like this too, where you can't move forward unless both players sort of move forward together. And so in this game, they were trying to break through that by giving you a split 4-screen, quadrant where you can travel about freely. You can go wherever you want to go, and you can explore on your own without having to drag the other player behind you.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Now, I will say I played this alone, but the one thing, and when you do play it by yourself, you actually take up the squares are still there, but they actually sort of parrot what's going on. It's not just 3 blank screens and you actually can sort of see other parts of your dungeon. So they actually sort of use the other panels when you're playing solo. When you go through this, though, once you get used to the actual size of everything, it actually they make everything pretty obvious, frankly. I mean, if you want the truth, you can see what keys are. You can see the magic weapons. You can tell when stuff will hurt you if you run into it. And it works pretty well. The enemies you don't have as much room to make them really intricate. You know what I mean? But you can tell what they are, what they're doing. There are a lot of stuff in this. I mean, it's not just like a couple. They could have really cheaped out on this boat, I guess what I'm saying. But there's a lot of magical stuff in this. Aside from what you start with, you've got magical swords, magic helmet, boots of speed, potions, and lots of keys. The keys kind of threw me off because you really have sort of a white and a blue key. But even if you have, like, say, a blue key, it won't necessarily open the blue door or the white. Same with the white key. Sometimes you have to go on and get through other parts to open the doors in certain areas. It's kind of confusing at first, but once I understood the game mechanic, I didn't have much of a problem with it. The game is interesting in that, much like the original Gauntlet or Gauntlet 2, a lot of it comes down to how they've designed the dungeon. And the dungeon design's pretty clever. Much like the Gauntlets, you're going to see areas that you can't get to, and you're going to have to figure out how to get to them, what area unlocks the door. You're going to be able to bypass areas you don't want to go to get out the exits. How did you fare gameplay-wise on this thing, Bode?
Well, it's really hard to say. This game doesn't exactly give you a good indicator of how far you've gotten as you move through this, because you're essentially just, moving through doors, unlocking doors, and moving on to new areas. What I will say, though, is that I really like several things about this game. You look at this game and you think, oh, it's a Gauntlet clone, but it's really not. This game does a lot of things that Gauntlet doesn't do. Like you said, it offers you a great amount of power-ups that are unique and interesting. The key system is cool. You basically have one inventory slot. So as you run over one key, the other key gets dropped. So it makes it easy to switch between keys when you need to pick up another key. The thing that I really enjoy about this game, and maybe this was seen as a limitation of the CoCo at the time, but it actually worked out in its favor, was that the game does not absolutely overwhelm you with enemies. It's not like Gauntlet, where the enemies just sort of rain down on you until there's no way out. This game, there are a lot of enemies that come that you have to defeat, but it never gets to that overwhelming stage. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I don't think that. First of all, I don't think that would have worked in this game because you're working with a lot less real estate than you are in Gauntlet. But there was probably some limitation to the amount of guys you could have on the scrim, and you get some. It's not like you only have one; you get multiple. But I mean, I don't mind that, to be honest with you, because you're really confined. There's a lot less open space in this, And when you come to a big room, it's actually kind of wacky. Because when you think about a large black space that you're in this room, if you go all the way to the top of the screen, that space may continue up to the next screen. It may move up to the next screen, so you can have a real epically huge chamber. Hallways may go up past where you can see them, and then stop. And so they use that aspect of the game pretty well, because basically all four of the scores, I guess we should mention this, you're like playing basically 4 different flip screen dungeon games here. When you're playing, there's no scrolling. It does flip screen to the different screens, so that's actually works in the favor of a game like this, because they can construct pretty intricate mazes and stuff. And I can even see a point where you would sit down and kind of map this out a little bit. Try to find your way through. I never found the levels. I didn't get super far into the game, but I got to like the 3rd or 4th level. And when you go through, after a while you get used to the level. There's a lot of backtracking to try to find keys to get to places you can't go. This game is not easy, is it, Bode? I mean, I thought it was, even on the easy setting, I thought it was pretty difficult. You can lose health quickly. There are certain areas you go through. They're like, I guess, like traps. And, like, you can get your health sucked down real quick if you're not careful. You're right. You're not going to get overran by people. But after you get your health ran down, it doesn't take much from the attacking bad guys to, like, take care of your character. So I found myself a lot more mindful of my hit points in this than I would be in, like, a Gauntlet, which is a good thing. Because as far as I know, there's no continues in this. When you run out of health, you're done. You can get food and drinks to up your health. I mean, and so they're vital in this game. They're not going to be inserting any more quarters in this. I mean, you're pretty much stuck with whatever power you had. And so when you get down to like single-digit health points, you're very careful as you work your way through this dungeon. This thing also has the exact same sort of thing that Gauntlet does. It's got the generators that bring the bad guys out. So I mean, they didn't reinvent the wheel here, but I think what they did was a nice spin on a classic, and in some ways I think I like this more than a Gauntlet game, because I think it's more geared toward home play, where you're not going to just keep feeding it in quarters. What did you think, Bode?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this is basically they've taken the initial idea for Gauntlet and they've said, okay, what can we do to make this interesting for someone that has an unlimited supply of quarters? Because that's really the only challenge in Gauntlet is how much money is in your pocket. In this game, you really have to keep track of where the keys are, where the doors are, and where the exits are. And so, and the probably the biggest problem that I had with this game is the lack of scrolling. You know, with flip screen games, we run into this a lot with the ZX Spectrum too, is that you have walls that don't look like walls because you've just hit the edge of the screen, and then you have
Yeah.
walls that are walls. And if you're trying to make a mental map, of course, you can get out a piece of graph paper and you can graph this bad boy out. And I'm sure that everybody that was successful playing Dungeons, that's exactly what they did because you have to. That's how you get through the game. But if
Yeah.
you're just trying to make a mental map, you really want to see the blocks that form the edges of the screen on all of the screens where the walls are. But there are some walls that are just the edge of the screen, and that's it. And that was frustrating. Of course, the other big thing is that it really would have been nice when you're playing a one-player game to have use of that whole screen area to play. You know, but
Yeah.
of course, that was done with and I'm sure that it would have been there. There were reasons why this was done the way it was done, and to get the most enjoyment out of this game, of course, you want to be playing with 2, 3 other people so you can get that full experience. Now, what an experience that would be when you have 2 players with 2 joysticks, the other 2 players crowded around the keyboard. I mean, it doesn't seem like you could have too much more fun than that when you can get 4 players around the CoCo and you're all trying to work together to make your way through this dungeon.
We should mention that 2 of the characters, the Ranger and the Magic User, are basically hardwired. They're all sort of hardwired to a controller, sort of like Gauntlet 1. The reason for that is
Absolutely.
those 2 characters use magic, so they need access to the extra buttons, basically, to make the magic work. It works out fine because you don't have to play them. You can always play one of the other 2 characters on the joystick, which I ended up playing the joystick characters. This got updated. By the way, I got a lot of this information from L. Curtis Boyle's fantastic CoCo game site. If you haven't been there, trust me, just Google CoCo games. It comes right up. But according to Curtis, this thing was updated in 2018, where they added that multi-voice sound if you've got 64K and up. But get this, boat. This is wacky. Another update for this has it running on a CoCo 3 with a Game Master cartridge, which has a sound trip in it, which allows you to play the title music with just 32K if you've got the Mega chip. Now, we've actually talked about the Game Master cartridges. I don't know if these things are even in wide release. I've never actually seen one in person, but I guess he's supporting it now. We know some other guys that have done games on those, so I guess you can get them somewhere if you look around. But if you've got 64K, you don't even need it. You can get the full voice for it. So that's kind of a neat option that he's thrown in there. But overall, I enjoyed this. I think it's quite a technical achievement to have the CoCo playing a 4-player multi-screen game with simultaneous play. I mean, no matter how you slice it, you're playing 4 people on the screen simultaneously. Pretty impressive, isn't it, Bode?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't think of any other CoCo games offhand that support 4-player simultaneous play.
Yeah. I took a quick look at the BBC micro version of this alongside the CoCo version, and you can see there's not really. I mean, it's a very faithful port, Boat.
Absolutely. Of course, you know, the BBC Micro is a league or two ahead of the CoCo in terms of technical specifications and price. So it's going to give you better graphics. It's going to give you better music and sound. But the CoCo port is, like you said, it's incredibly faithful. And it's so awesome that we're able to play this classic on the CoCo/Dragon thanks to this guy.
Yeah, I got to give him credit. And, of course, also credit for his incredible emulation package. But yeah, this stands up well. And if you're watching at home, really, you've got multiple palette solutions, so you could pretty much make your CoCo experience look almost identical to the BBC if you took the Notion boat. Because you've got those options in there, which is nice. This game doesn't get talked about that much online. I found I had to make this footage. I couldn't find any lengthy footage of it on YouTube. I was surprised. And I never heard of this game. I was real surprised that it hasn't gotten a lot more action than it's gotten, because I think this would be a winner. Maybe this might be one we drag out for Boat Fest next year.
Yeah.
That would be kind of fun to get 4 people huddled around this thing. Did we get any Discord action on this thing, buddy? May have a go at this?
We did. Our first review
Oh,
comes from Pajako 6502. He says the author has done a very admirable job of porting the original game from the Acorn computer version, and colors aside, it plays very similarly and runs at a fair pace too. I love the whole idea of 4 simultaneous players crowded around one machine, and for some of us, this would have been as close to Gauntlet as we got at home. Everything feels quite claustrophobic, and exploring can be trial and error as there are exits to other screens that you can't always see, so only wall hugging or watching where baddies appear will help you. The key system, however, bugged me, as trying to work out which keys go to which door leads to a lot of backtracking, and when you can only hold one key at a time, it's easy to accidentally swap out for another key you walked over and end up not knowing which key you are currently holding. I've done that before.
Yeah.
However, I played several games despite this, so what the heck do I know? If top-down dungeon crawlers are your thing, you might get a kick out of this one. 7 out of 10.
He's got a valid point there, Boat. That is one of the... If I had to point out a flaw, the key thing, you could swap. I mean, it just flips back and forth real quick. I wish there was a sound note there and maybe a second break when you went over one key. And it is a pain to try to get the right keys. That can be real frustrating and confusing. So that's a very good point there, Boat.
L. Curtis Boyle writes, I concur with everything Pajako said. The key system is the weak point of the game. The strongest point, and an advantage over Gauntlet, is that players can wander the maze independently. Other players aren't trapped on the same screen waiting for stragglers to catch up. The disadvantage to this approach is that each player sees far less of the maze than a full screen style game like Gauntlet. But I prefer this approach versus the trapped player model. It should be mentioned that the game can run in 32K rather than 64K with music and the special Game Master cartridge version, where you can burn it onto a ROM for the Game Master cartridge. 7.5 out of 10 for me. And finally, Exile in Paradise writes, Dunjunz. I've played this less than I've studied it. Sixie not only made an emulator and an assembler, but also an entire game port worth looking through to learn lots about mapping, sounds, title screens, loaders, multiple versions, and more. That said, the finished game is a lot of fun solo and more with friends. Others have talked about key quest backtracking, and maybe I am just used to that from the games of yore. How far back and forth did you go in Times of Lore, for example? My main grr is sometimes fighting with controls to try and react to the surprise guy who jumps me from the sides. I really need to level up in spot checks, I guess. I can only assume it's faithful to the original, which speaks pretty well for it because this game is a lot of fun. Sixie even went all out with the original presentation. Tape with insert and all worthy of being in any CoCo or Dragon owner collection, and one of the games out there which takes advantage of add-on sound for the CoCo and Dragon for period-correct sounding music that we all wish we'd had back then. I'd give it flawable out of Wamba stars because I am terrible at game review reality. Dunjunz. Get it? Play it. Play it with others. A definite must for Dragon meetups and CoCo fests. Thank you guys for all your reviews.
I think that's a nice way to sum it up, Boat. I enjoyed this one, and I will be exploring it further because I like flip screen dungeons, and I might have to load this one up with the boy at some point in the near future. Definitely something I'll try at Boat Fest next year, Boatster.
Oh, yeah.
That's all we got on that one, Boat.
All right, well, we'll see you guys next time, and until then, all hail
L. Curtis Boyle. Oh.